the Sankey Sliding Center, Sochi, Russia. This is the 2014 Winter Olympic venue, and I am Martin Haven. Alongside me, Olympic brakeman Kurt Tomasevich. We're ready for the final race of the FIBT two-man bobsleigh World Cup season. And Kurt, it started to rain this morning, it snowed, now it can't make its mind up, but whatever, this fully covered track should be immune from interference by the weather.
Yeah, other than maybe a little humidity that might play a little factor in the ice conditions, the weather shouldn't be much of a factor.
Well, this is a brand new track for everybody, just a week of training before the World Cup gets underway. So everybody's still got to learn the secrets in this 1,500-meter uphill and downhill run.
Yeah, that's one of the unique things you just mentioned, is that there are some uphill sections of this track, and that makes it very interesting. The start is very similar to a number of other tracks on the circuit, including maybe Chisana or Park City. The start times are probably going to be in like the 480s or so, the best start times. First few curves, nothing real fancy, just, you know, trying to keep the sled very controlled, nice and smooth out of curves 1 and 2. Curves 3, and then a little kink out of 4. You're not going to feel much there, but curves 5 to 6, there's where the interesting parts take place, because you see, it's hard to tell right here, but right here you're going uphill. And that's very unique for a track to be in the middle of the track to be going uphill. That's very unique. You're going through the rest of the track, there's a couple curves that have kind of a double wave. Right here, you can see they're coming through curve 10. And then another uphill section as you come out of curve 14 into 15. Right here's the left, curve 14. And then uphill, really steep uphill into 15, that double wave in 15. And then the 16 and 17 curves finish the track. A little bit of a break before the finish line. And then, of course, the brakeman must pull the brakes in time to stop the sled at the top of the hill.
Well, a really long outrun here. It's, I mean, monumentally long before you get to this big finish house. Well, this is a brand new track. The track workers are very new. We're going to see an awful lot of interest here. Lyndon Rush is our World Cup points leader. He needs a top 10 finish to guarantee that season-long Crystal Globe. If Oscar's Melbardis wins and Lyndon's outside the 10, then Melbardis would become the first Latvian driver ever to win the Crystal Globe. Further on down the order, you can see the rest of the field. Some close battles as well. Manny Mahata, Stephen Holcomb closely tied in a battle for third place. Alexander Zubkov just ahead of Francesco Friedrich, the world champion. And 3 stories up, here is Zubkov warming up in this huge cathedral-like cavern at the top. Air temperature 2 degrees, well, that's come down 8 degrees since this morning, and ice -1 or so. What about the ice, though, Kurt? The track crew very inexperienced. What does it feel like when you're sitting in the back? Do you feel it chattering and bumping?
Definitely. This track, these past 2 weeks have been really rough on the brakeman. The chattering that you feel coming through those curves is nothing but, you know, just shaking your brain inside your head. Makes it very difficult on the brakeman as well as the equipment, too. You know, this is toward the end of the season where the equipment is kind of on its last legs anyway. So, you know, to have this last couple of weeks be really violent and rough on the equipment, that makes it tough.
Maybe the single worst place to have come directly from is St. Moritz, the smoothest sheet of ice in the world. Well, if they finally manage to get those shades up or not, won't make much difference to the race. Getting ready to go with Alexander Zubkov, our first sled on the ice, and the Russian may well be the man to beat here. He will, without question, set a new start record and a new track record, because this is the first ever official race here for the FIBT, and so records do not exist. So he will, at the very least, start the campaign with that. And he's got quite a few sleds coming behind him as well. Not just quite a few, 33. This is a full World Cup size field. This is an enormous field of sleds, bearing in mind only 20 will get to go through to the second heat. So more than a third of the sleds, 2 out of every 3 will stay in, but more than a third will be cut. So Kurt, for anybody realistically outside 15 or 16 starting position, you've got to be worrying about making the second cut.
Yeah, every country that wants to compete at the Olympics wants to be at this event. That's why there's such a large field, and they want to get as many trips as possible. So, you know, even just finishing in the top 20 gives you that one extra run where you could learn something. You get a little bit more experience on this track, so it's a big thing.
Pierre Luder's in the back in the cap, helping lay the sled on the ice for the first of our starters. It is Alexander Zubkov and Dmitry Chunenkov. And if Russia have a big hope for gold in the Winter Games, then he may well be it. Somewhere between him and Alexander Tretyakov, the men's skeleton slider, They have got to have a lot of eggs in these baskets. The question is, what does Zubkov know about this track already? Let's look for the new start record, which is 4.90, and that's not a bad getaway in such a short start either.
Yeah, Zubkov has more runs than anybody on this track, and he's going to have more runs than anybody on the track when the Olympics come around, too. He's the heavy favorite. Everybody's looking at him, and by pure luck, he drew number one. He's going to be the first off the hill today, and everybody's going to be chasing him just like we expected to be chasing him anyway.
Well, this may well be his final hurrah. A lot of British Olympians after London 2012 said, actually, do you know what? I am going to call it a day and not go to Rio because nothing could surpass this. He's 38. He's heading into his home Olympic Games. Whatever, win, lose or draw, surely nothing could meet that in terms of athletic endeavor.
Yeah, my guess is he would have retired after Vancouver if the Olympics weren't going to be held in Sochi. But they are held in Russia here, so he's looking forward to performing in front of his home crowd. 57:02 downtime. We'll see where that stands.
Well, that is quicker than we saw at any stage in training. So Alexander Zubkov bringing the A game. 130 kilometers an hour at the bottom, over 81 miles an hour. So we're talking about this being a relatively slow track. Certainly we're not over 140 like Whistler or St. Moritz, but it's still quick enough.
Yeah, that start is a very steep start, and so the start time of a 490, that's pretty quick compared to some of the tracks. But then again, those uphill sections and some of those double wave curves, you can see him hanging on a curve here just a little bit longer than what he'd like, I think. But, you know, those sections of the track that go uphill, they're really going to slow the sled down. And it's not going to be really high speeds that we saw in Whistler or last week in St. Moritz.
So Thomas Florschutz and Andy Bredow now take up the challenge. 32 more sleds, all trying to beat Alexander Zubkov. Or are they? We'll talk about this a little bit more, but the Poison Chalice pre-Olympic winners tend not to go on to win the Olympic Games in bobsledding.
4:95 start time. You know, Andreas Bredow pushed for Thomas Florschutz after Kevin Kuske got injured in St. Moritz a couple of weeks ago. So it looks like Florschutz did stick with Bredow. Yeah, it was
a bad hamstring tear, I gather, for Kevin Kuska, and I said to the doctors immediately afterwards, is he okay? Yeah, he's okay, but you won't see him again till next season.
Wow, this is impressive. He had 0.05 of a second deficit at the start, but he's reeled that into only 0.01 of a second. Now he's taking the lead. The clock is green.
German sleds were producing fantastic speed at high numbers in St. Moritz, and they are quick here as well. Not as quick as the Russian yet, and a couple of mistakes. He'll drop that. No, he won't. 130.8 for Zubkov. 130.8. That will keep him in the lead to the line and a new track record. That is a great drive from Thomas Florschutz.
Yeah, that's very impressive. I would expect Zubkov to be setting the pace for quite a number of sleds before somebody was actually able to beat him, but Florschutz, the next sled down the hill, was able to beat him.
Now, what we saw in men and women's skeleton and in women's bob was that the track didn't keep giving up speed all the way through the heat.
Yeah, a couple of mistakes by Florschutz, hanging on some of the curves a little bit long, but this is that uphill section where, you know, you really need to control the sled because you can lose a lot of speed if you're going uphill and make a mistake.
Well, Thomas Florschutz looking pretty pleased with that, as well he might. I'm sure, like everybody else, he still feels there's a lot to discover about this track and no time in which to learn it. Next up, Lyndon Rush of Canada, a World Cup points leader with Jesse Lumsden behind him. Lyndon with wins in La Plana and Koenigsee. Both snowy races. Let's see if he can produce win number 3 of the season. Needs a top 10 finish to guarantee his first season title in two-man.
4:92 start time, 0.02 of a second behind Zubkov, but 0.03 of a second ahead of Florschutz. So if Lyndon Rush can keep that speed, especially through this first part of the track, get down to the bottom half of the track and have a good velocity, definitely keep that lead.
Jesse Lumsden's going to be pleased. 50.3 velocity in the first corner, quicker than anyone else. 74.9, equal speed with Florschutz, and still in the lead by scant hundreds. Now it's down to negligible. 126.8, a kilometre an hour down. Now, I worried in St. Moritz that the Eurotech sleds were not hitting those high numbers at top speed, and is that the case here as well?
Yeah, it's going to take a little more time for everybody to figure out what the secrets are to this track. You know, do you need a more aerodynamic sled? Do you need a sled that comes off corners well? Some of those little tiny things that are going to have to play themselves out in the next, well, 2 days here, but then next week, or excuse me, next year, we have a week of international training here is ready.
I know that the guys at Eurotech will not be sleeping on the job. If they think that they're not hitting the numbers for an aerodynamic reason, which is the most likely reason, then they'll be working hard on that.
The one impressive thing is that he also beat Zubkov. Zubkov, the slowest sled down the hill out of our top 3 so far. A great load, and you mentioned that high speed that they had out of the first curve, which means that they loaded into the sled well and had great velocity going into the first curve. Little tap coming out of this curve and then to that uphill section, and that makes it a little tough.
World Cup leader Lyndon Rush with Jesse Lumsden looking relaxed after that. Now then, great start draw for Simone Bertazzo and Simone Fontana, the Italian, in the top 10 in the World Cup rankings by the skin of his teeth. But let's see if he can produce a big drive. Best result of the season, 4th in La Plagne. He's been a World Cup winner in two-man, 4.95. Again, not that far away, just 500ths away from the fastest start of Alexander Zubkov. And that's what he needs to get himself back into contention.
Yeah, Bertazzo not used to having such a start that would be ranked so high, but right now he's tied with Zubkov at the start of the first 50 meters, and I don't know if Zubkov just had a rough day or what so far, but he's not as impressive as we thought he would have. Bertazzo only 0.15 of a second now behind Florsheets.
Maybe Zubkov has seen what history tells us about pre-season winners and doesn't even want to jinx that. You know, athletes tend to believe that you make your own luck, but they're all superstitious as well, right?
Definitely.
Bertazzo, quarter of a second back. Oh, and drifting away a little now, 3600s. You have to wonder how much development work in the last 5, 6, 7 years has gone into the Italian sleds, or whether they've pretty much been set in aspic since the 2006 games, of course, when that was the massive development push up to the Olympics in Cesana. It's in 4th at the moment, but 4/10 back. Now, in the skeleton race we had this morning, that would probably have left him in 4th place. However, I think the gaps might be a little closer in the two-man.
Yeah, there was a rumor that Bertazzo might be getting some new equipment going into next year. There was, again, a rumor that Ferrari may be coming into the play, building a sled for them.
130.2 at the bottom again. Not bad speed. We'll see a lot going slower than that. Bertazzo might just have rediscovered a little bit of the sprinkle of magic that has given him World Cup wins in the two-man before. What about this man, Manny Mahata, with Christian Poser behind him. And let's see what young Christian can do to help Manuel Mahata towards a competitive start. Again, if you're not in the 90s here, Kurt Tomasevich, you're really going to struggle for pace all the way down.
Yeah, you want to be in the 90s at the, 490s at the start. What's not 502? That's not great for Mahata. And you definitely want to be over 50 kilometers an hour coming out of there. He was right at 50 kilometers an hour, so he's going to have to drive his way into a great finish.
Well, 495 start and 49.9 for Bertazzo, 502 and 50 for Mahata. So they're getting more energy into the sled, the Italians, even though the numbers don't look so good at the start.
Yeah, definitely a good start velocity for that start time, but you need both in order to be really successful.
1700s back. He's currently in 5th position behind Simone Bertazzo of Italy. 127.5, 2 kilometers an hour quicker than the Italian sled, though. Little tap there.
Coming to that uphill section, you look pretty smooth, nice and straight into curve 15.
Flopped a little off the exit into 15. That goes over the in-run of the track. 130.8, sensational speed, as quick as anybody else we've seen. Closes the gap to a quarter-second margin. And that puts him into 4th place. And only 1200s behind Alexander Zubkov, the red-hot favorite.
Yeah, again, not a great start time and decent start velocity, but that was definitely driving that kept him in the top 4. Coming out of curve 11 into 12 and 13, which are more of a chicane, a little tap there. But you know, that's pretty decent. If you can take that tap and keep the sled straight, that's not going to cost you a whole lot of speed.
Thomas Florsheets leads for Germany from World Cup points leader Lyndon Rush. Sixth of our 33 sleds in this first of 2 heats at the Sochi Sliding Centre is Oskars Melbardis, and he is the man who could end up as the World Cup champion if some catastrophe befalls Lyndon Rush, the current points leader.
I would guess about a 486, 487 start time here. I think he's going to have the best start time of the day. Maybe beat Hefty could pose a threat a little bit, but 481.
My goodness. That is an epic getaway. That's nearly a 1/10 of a second faster than Alexander Zubkov. That's a big, big start.
And a little bit of a drive, too much driving coming out of curve 2, so it's going to be tough because, you know, even though he has that great start, he's going to have a huge lead coming down the track for at least the top half of the track. He needs to keep that velocity because he's not known for his great driving ability yet.
Well, don't forget that Zubkov has driven in 3 Olympic Games already. Melbardis has only competed in 1, and that was as a brakeman in Whistler. So, given away a decade and a half of experience, 2 decades of driving, because Zubkov started in luge. Not a bad exit there, takes the tap 12 and 13. That uphill section into corner 15 is apparently steeper than the outrun in Park City after the finish.
I believe that, definitely. 2/200ths of a second lead at one point, but now dead even tied.
My goodness, ties the track record. Listen to the Latvians at the top and the bottom of the track.
That's really impressive that so many sleds have beat Zubkov for 1, but that Melbardis had such a great start time, just wasn't able to hold that lead all the way down the track, and that's going to say a lot. You know, he really needs to improve his driving ability before next year.
Well, that is going to come with age and experience only, isn't it?
Those guys just horses behind that sled, really power the sled off, get in nice and smooth, and get down. So, yeah, great technique. It looks great with a good start time and good start velocity.
There's downwards Chaiskins. Melbardis still with the helmet on. Ties for the lead of the race. Wow. Okay, let's settle back for some more excitement now. Here comes Steve Holcomb with Stephen Langton behind him in the US sled. And the BMW, the new 2-man sled, was being driven in the women's race yesterday by Jamie Grubel. They'll come back with more familiar ground. 491 again. That's a big, strong start.
50.1 kilometers an hour coming out of there, which is decent speed. Now again, as in contrast to what Melbardis did just before him, Holcomb is able to keep the sled going straight from curve 2 to 3. And actually has the lead now by 1/100th of a second. So if he can keep that, a little drift there.
Well, we're going to see so many more mistakes than we would expect at any other track, Kurt, because nobody knows this place.
Yeah, that little drift he had between curves 5 and 6 is an uphill section. And when you drift going uphill, that hurts you a little bit.
126.2, same speed as Melbardis, but the fastest was Mahata, 127.5, and Florschutz. Zubkov had 128 there. Another thing you notice about this track particularly, coming from St. Moritz, is that all the sleds, no matter how good they are, sound like a bag of spanners rattling appallingly over the rough ice.
Yeah, that really takes its toll on the brakemen, as well as the drivers, too. I mean, they're trying to be calm and steady and keep the sled controlled, but when they're chattering over that rough ice, it makes it really hard to make those fine, detailed movements.
Rattles the eyeballs in the socket, loosens the fillings in the teeth.
Again, really good start time by Steve and Steve. You know, they really work hard this week trying to find the best load depth, the right time to get into the sled in order to have the best start time and start velocity.
Good to see Jasmine Fenlater looking happy at the top after yesterday's pain. Little drift into the wall there. Again, it was a flat tap, so not half as bad as hitting with one side. And Holcomb knowing he's making mistakes. Well, next up, let's see again where the start record ends up at the end of this run. Bert Hefty and Thomas Lamparter, again, 2 of the real exceptional starters in this men's field.
I think these 2 can definitely get into the 480s, but man, I don't know if they can match that 481 set by Melbardis.
481 is a massive, massive start. Oh, was that a slip from Lamparter?
Recovered quickly, but we'll see what happens here as he gets into the sled.
Hefty in late.
485, so maybe it didn't affect him too much.
Well, maybe they might have been down at 481 if they hadn't had that slip off the block. You know, the first step is so vital in any run. 74.9, good velocity as well. The only sled quicker was Melbardis.
We'll see how he handles coming out of 5 and into 6.
Drifts away from the wall, gets a decent exit to 6 as well. Height in 7. Yeah, good height. Nice and early. Gets the exit.
And that shows you still, his clock is still in the green with 0.15 of a second lead.
1:27.9, quicker than anybody apart from Zubkov.
Comes down a little bit hard coming into curve 14, but I think he's going to keep this lead. He's got a pretty decent lead now, 0.14 of a second.
Looking
up
smooth.
to 0.15 of a second, so he's actually extending it.
No panic. 1:31.5, fastest speed we've seen from anybody at all, and a brand new track record. That was a top draw effort from Beat Hefty. Absolutely storming drive from the Swiss.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to look back at that start to see if Lamparter did have a little bit of a slip. But if he did, man, there's still room for improvement, and they can actually set a faster time. Just maybe slipped off the block just a little bit. He actually didn't slip on the ice, but I think his foot just shifted as he launched off the blocks, which that's a pretty minor thing. So again, 4:85 is probably a realistic start time for them.
I was trying to work out if it was because Hefty got to the handle before the hit from the back. Speed at the finish, 1:31.5 for Beat Hefty. The City sled absolutely flying. 5 World Cups so far for Hefty this year, a 7th, 2 silver medals and 2 gold medals. He's still in pretty decent form. Silver in the World Championships as well. Now for the USA, Corey Butner and Johnny Quinn. Johnny about 10 kilos lighter. He took the trimmer to his beard the other day, and do you know, I almost didn't recognize him. The wild man of the mountains is gone.
5 seconds flat start time. You know, Johnny was kind of a late entry. Didn't know he was going to race this race until about midweek. So they didn't have as much time to prepare as he would have liked probably, but 5 seconds is, you know, keeps him in the mix at least a little bit.
Definitely does. The Autism sled, 2900s back. Again, Corey Butner, probably apart from Malvarez, the least experienced driver so far in the business.
A little long on the curve there. Takes that double wave. Looks pretty smooth coming out of most of these curves. He's not draining a whole lot of time.
Decent speed as well, 1:27.4, 79.2 miles an hour. That's a great run uphill as well. You can make mistakes going down. You cannot make mistakes on the uphill sections. 1:31.3, second fastest speed for the Bodine sled. That is a really good trip. 57.13 leaves him in 6th position, just behind Alexander Zubkov and in front of Manuel Mahata, and you will take that on any day on any track.
Yeah, and in addition to that, he's ahead of Stephen Holcomb by 0.14 of a second too.
Well, I wasn't going to mention that, but since you do as a teammate, yeah, absolutely. There you go.
See, hangs on just the exit of there, just a little bit long, but sets him up pretty nice there. So maybe the drivers are trying to be as long as possible on that curve.
This is the big 3 pressure corner 10. Now, normally to get 3 pressures, you need a 360-degree Kreisel. That's only just over 180 degrees. Not sure how they hit that extra pressure in there. Next up is our 2-man junior world champion. Oh, yes, and our 2-man senior world champion, Francesco Friedrich, with Janis Becker behind him, the man who helped him to that triumph in St. Moritz 3 weeks ago. Just whiskers past the wall on a 492 getaway. Another big start.
Yeah, it says it's a good start and he had good velocity, but because they just missed that right wall, I think they went into curve 1 a little bit late, so that might show up on their next split time. Yeah, they went from 0.07 of a second back to 0.19 of a second back. Just not the velocity near that what Hefty had.
Listen to how much this FES sled rattles. It's been shaken to bits by the track here. 3/10 back.
Now right here, he had a little bit of trouble earlier in the week and actually crashed. Our senior world champion last week crashed on this course, and it's kind of threw everybody for a loop and confused some people about how that could happen, but seems to be getting a pretty good run together here.
Big skid into 14, that uphill section into corner 15 really going to cost him. Only 129 kilometers now. That is the lowest speed we have seen by nearly 1.5 kilometers. 57.35. That's not the drive that won him the World Championships 3 weeks ago in St. Moritz. It was absolutely outstanding there. The best starts, the best drives.
Coming out of curve 11 into the chicane, you can see the sled drifting a little bit to the left. He tries to steer it to make it straight, but you know, that back end is still farther left than what the right end. That means he's going at a skid. The runners are going just a little bit sideways. That's not fast.
Bert Hefty of Switzerland leads the race from Thomas Florschutz and Oskars Melbardis, and Russia's big hope Alexander Zubkov lying in 5th position, nearly 3/10 of a second adrift. Well, next up on the ice, the 11th of 33 sleds in this first of 2 heats. World Cup number 9 of the season. Chris Spring and Lascelles Brown. Martin Haven and Kurt Tomasevich watching the action. Let's see what their start is. A 4:89, another big start. Lascelles Brown could so easily have been out for the season after not quite making it into the 4-man in the first day of action in St. Moritz.
Lascelles Brown, 489. It's really hard to keep coming up with good things to say about Lascelles. I mean, he just keeps putting up big numbers year after year and race after race. That's a great start time with Chris Spring, 489.
But the best thing we can say about him is that he's been doing that for a decade and a half, and he doesn't seem to be losing his edge. He's still a monster. 1:26.4, little shy on pace again, like the Eurotech sleds we saw earlier from Lyndon Rush. Chris Spring really had a great 2-man weekend in St. Moritz.
Yeah, was that the highest finishing Canadian at the World Championships?
6th in the world. Lyndon Rush was 8th place. He's 7th here with a 57.14, just 100th behind Corey Butner. So there's a great little battle there between the number 2s, and he's in front of Stephen Holcomb as well, and tied with Manuel Mahata. Spring is getting better and better.
Yeah, look at this great start by Lascelles. Just power and efficiency. He can really run with the sled, and he runs without wasted energy, and that's something that a lot of brakemen have trouble doing.
Well, thinking back to this time last year, Chris Spring could barely walk after his accident in Altenburg. Look at the start he's got, and look at the drive he's produced. Third of our US sleds is Nick Cunningham. Dallas Robinson on the back handles. It's behind you, Nick. I'm not sure where he was off to just then. Let's see what they can produce. Their teammates, Holcomb and Langton, 491. Butner and Quinn, 5 flat. If they can break that 5-second mark, look at them steaming like racehorses in the cold air now at this big cathedral of speed here in Sankey.
Dallas had the fastest push from the brakes as far as the American brakeman went at the beginning of the season. He didn't race at World Championships, and I know he's itching to race here. 490, pretty good start here.
Yeah, absolutely. Ties Holcomb and Langton except for 100. 50.2 first corner momentum as well. That is great power in the sled.
Now Nick in a BTC sled as compared to Holcomb, who's in a Bodine sled, as well as Butner in a Bodine sled, and Nick really trying to get used to this BTC steering throughout the season. See if it pays off. Coming out curve 7 into 9. Pretty decent, only 26/100ths of a second back.
7th spot at the moment. That would, if he holds that, tie him 3 ways with Mahata and Chris Spring. Now 9th place, tying with Steve Holcomb in that spot, which is not bad at all for a rookie driver in his first World Cup season. Half a second back. Drifting away a little now outside the top 10. 129.4. Really? Wow. Not as quick as he might have hoped down at the bottom from that Latvian sled.
100th behind Friedrich.
Wow. Good battle on hand there as well. And just 300s, 400s out of the top 10. 600s out of the top 10.
Yeah, and that was mostly driving and equipment, because this great start that they had here, Dallas, really launching that sled off. He's a tall athlete, so he's got some long levers to propel the sled. What I really like about Nick when he jumps into the sled is he doesn't twist his body a whole lot before he loads into the sled like some drivers do. He's very forward when he gets in.
Height there, the first height, the first pressure drops you down into the ditch there below that little Sochi logo. That's Sochi in Cyrillic. There's Nick Cunningham. Next up then, Justin Cripps. Neville Wright behind him in the Canada 3 sled. And another World Cup rookie. We've had a big slew of them from North America. Corey Butner, Nick Cunningham.
484 start time.
Oh, that is just monstering away. 300ths of a second away from the start record. That is the 2nd fastest start, beating Hefty and Lamparter. You think that Cripps and especially Neville Wright are going to be grinning when they find that out?
Well, that was really impressive, but a lot of mistakes Cripps has made already at the top of the tracks. You know, coming out of curves early, drifting a little bit there. 0.2 of a second back. Even though they had a fantastic start time, he's really going to fall back quickly.
The track is definitely quicker than it was in training, but he's 10 kilometers an hour down. There's definitely something odd with those timing eyes. Saw this yesterday, didn't still quite believe he could be 10 kilometers an hour down without almost having wrecked somewhere.
Yeah, but half a second back already coming out of curve 10 and into 11.
And yet he's got 1:28.2, which is a very respectable speed at the bottom. 57.41 for him. Started second quickest, ended up in 13th spot, but again 500s behind Cunningham, 600s behind Francesco Friedrich, a 10th away from Bertazzo in 10th spot. We're seeing some very close battles here.
Coming out of 11 into the chicanes, again, you want to keep that sled straight and not tap walls. He does take the tap and a little bit of a drift in the back end. That's going to cost you a lot of speed. And then he comes into that uphill section in between curve 14 and 15. Right there, there's a lot of pressure because you're going from downhill to uphill. Gets on the curve pretty early. But another run to come.
Justin Cripps just saying, I wish I could have matched that with my driving. They're obviously talking about that epic getaway. Rico Pater and Seaman Friedley now, 14th of 33 sleds in this World Cup field for the final race of the year. The biggest field we have seen all year by some margin in World Cup racing. And of course, the draw is this track, the 2014 Winter Olympic venue. Rico Pater has been the stalwart of the Swiss World Cup operation all year. He's raced in all the World Cup outings in North America as well, when Bert Hefty was still getting up to speed in Europe.
Yeah, it's going to be a good battle between the Swiss drivers next year with Gallagher and Baumann coming back, and as well as Hefty and Peter they're already on the circuit. So, you know, between those four, it's going to be interesting to see which two are on the World Cup circuit, and, you know, hopefully they're going to try to qualify 3 for the Olympics.
Somebody's always going to lose out. Rico Pater getting a chance to race at the top of the Swiss table this year because of injuries for Gallagher and for Gregor Baumann. 126.6, 78.7 miles an hour, good speed. Again, neat lines. Little skid there. Citius sled is very aerodynamic. 131.3, same speed as Corey Butner. Equal fastest, and that helps him into the top 10.
Yeah, Rico had a great bottom part of the track there. His rank was 12th at the start of the track. He got up to 14th, but somehow he crawled back up into a rank of 9 as he crossed the finish line.
Again, don't make mistakes going uphill, and the speed will stay on board the sled. And looks like he kept it clean where he needed to.
Yeah, I think this is coming out of curve 9 and into 10. A little bit of a drift, but, you know, because he hung on to curve 9 a little bit too long, but for the most part, that was a great drive with that Citius sled.
Well, we're now a third of the way into our field. Next up is Alexander Kazyanov of Russia with Max Belugin behind him. Russia too, lots of noise from the Russian athletes and fans here. And there are hundreds of volunteers in their distinctive blue uniforms. There's a lot more of them in 12 months' time. 496. Again, the Russians know they really need to bring the A game here and get that start.
Just like Zubkov, Kazyanov has a number of runs on this track, more than any other competitors. You know, he started off the hill in 15th, but I think he's going to try to crawl his way up. I would be disappointed if I were him and I wasn't in the top 10 after this first run.
Yeah, more than disappointed, because all of the Russian Federation are here as well.
He's now in 14th place. He's falling back a little bit quicker than I would have hoped.
1:19.0. Where's that gone?
45 of a second back, still falling back farther and farther into the uphill section, into curve 15, that double wave.
Well, this is the drive of somebody who's hit everything all the way down, but he hasn't hit everything all the way down, and he still clocks over 130 kilometers an hour at the bottom. He's going to have words with somebody. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of a sentence that starts with his face looking like that.
Yeah, nobody would have guessed that the Russians would be in 5th and 11th place after the first run. I would have expected 1st and maybe 5th or 6th.
I think, again, he did a good job at the bottom to haul himself back from 14th up to 11th.
Here's coming through curve 10. You can see the waves that they take. That was the first wave. Here comes the second wave. The third one really quick. It causes that smooth exit into curve 11.
Goff looks relatively happy with that, and he knows more about the track than you and I do, so who can tell? Next up, John Jackson of Great Britain and Bruce Tasker, Royal Marine Commando, like other former and current Marines, celebrating the fact that just yesterday, I think, was the date when in 1942 the Royal Marines were first founded. Let's see, Bruce Tasker on the back of this sled. They're looking for a big start. Craig Pickering is on the back of the GB2 sled of Lamin Dean. That's a great looking load from Tasker. He runs it a long way. And I think we're going to see more as people get used to this track, that the driver's in early and that allows the brakeman to get real speed out of this sled.
Yeah, there's a lot of tricks we're trying to learn early, and that's one of those, is to see how deep the start grooves go down the track, because if the start grooves are very short, then of course both athletes have to be in the sled early so that the sled doesn't drift left or right. But if they're long grooves, then you can keep both athletes outside of the sled as long as possible. But if you keep them out too long, of course, that kills your start velocity as well. So there's a lot of things to be learned yet as we go through this week of training and into next year.
1:26.0, that's not bad speed at all. It's 10th at the start, 14th place. And we've seen a few sleds do this now, haven't we? Drop back in the early part of the run, but then when the speed builds, finding some speed at the bottom. 1:29.5. Well, gets himself into 15th place, tied with Justin Cripps.
I know some teams come into this because it's a post-World Championships race, and sometimes they use different braking and different push athletes, but I know John Jackson still pushing to try to find the best finish possible. Earlier this week, they used Bruce and had a type of a race-off to see who was going to be the push athlete, and Bruce won, obviously pushing really strong here, but maybe he was a little fatigued from having to race earlier this week as well. Up earlier, coming out of curve 2, I believe. Here it comes off nice and straight to keep that start velocity.
50 kilometers an hour out of the start of a 4:94 getaway. Bed Hefty is our race leader. Thomas Florschutz, Oscars Melbardis tied for second spot ahead of Lyndon Rush of Canada, the World Cup points leader. Midway point in the field, 17th of 33 sleds. Jan Verber of the Czech Republic, Michal Vacek behind him. Verber had a good World Championships in 2 and 4-man.
4:99 start time, not too bad for those guys.
It is a tiny nation in terms of its bobsled operation, the Czech Republic. Just this one crew at the top level. Of course, that means that you don't have the sort of depth of knowledge and talent of a multi-sled operation to draw on.
Yeah, a lot of times they like to partner up with some of the big countries and, kind of share equipment, share coaching, and that sort of thing. But for the most part, the Czechs have relied on their own coaching. And
very late. We saw a couple of those in the first heat of the women's race, nearly rolling the sled off the corner.
He did have a little trouble earlier this week. I think he crashed out of curve 10. And that was curve 9 where he had the trouble there, but got it together for the rest of the trip, coming through curve 16, one more curve to go.
Despite that near crash, not as slow as Alexander Kazyanov through the speed traps either. Wow, got away with that by the skin of his teeth, but the brakeman was starting to feel his head below his backside, and that's not a great feeling.
Yeah, that split second where we call it the moment of silence right before you crash, when the runners aren't on the ice. You can feel that, and that makes you a little bit nervous, but goes really low in the belly of 9, and then toward the end of 9, can't control that pressure, gets really high, and you can see his right runners, right runners up in the air, and then slams into curve 10.
Brought it down too early. Annie Schneider-Heinze did the same thing. Vicky Ole yesterday in the women's race. They got away with it as well, just. So now then, on to page 2 of our entry list with Edwin van Kalken and Sybren Jansma, 18th of 33 sleds. Now the Dutch, by rights, really should be in the top 20, firmly in the top 15, and probably in the top 10. But how much is Edwin's leg still slowing them down? He's recovering from a hamstring that he tore in Whistler still. Talked to him earlier in the week, said, how's it going? He said, it's getting better and better, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, a rank of 8 at the start, and when they're healthy, I would expect a rank of at least 5. Those guys are really strong and fast athletes. You know, former track and field, both very tall as well. So when they get that sled moving, they can cover a lot of ground with each stride.
Of course, with the height comes a certain degree of weight, and that means that you're not pushing a very heavy sled either.
Slowly falling back. He had a rank of 8 at the start. Now he's back 2100s into 3600s, from 11 to a rank of 15 now.
It's another Eurotech sled, so whatever, if there is an aerodynamic problem now compared to the rest of the field with Eurotech, it's affecting the Dutch. Hits 12 and 13. Great indication of the fact that there are actually corners there, sort of.
Yeah, and then also between 14 and 15, that's that uphill section, very steep uphill section, and had a big slide there. That's what caused him to drop into 17th place.
Yeah. And he was 11th early on, and just lost speed gradually, and then a little bit more and a little bit more. You can see some fans at the track here today in the little grandstand area under the roof in the finish area. Van Kalker, 17th spot, 10th away from the tie for 15th between Justin Cripps and John Jackson.
Now here we're going to see that uphill section between curve 14 and 15. He takes that tap on the right side, but for the most part, you know, he's kept the sled pretty straight, but that's, you know, that's very difficult when he makes mistakes like that going uphill.
19th sled is the French Loic Kosterg and Romain Heinrich. That's 2 really good results this season in Altenburg in Germany. True, the field was a little depleted, but nevertheless, they really excelled themselves. Great performances there in the 2-man and the 4-man.
5:04 start time, drifted a little bit to the left right out of those start grooves, but was able to keep it off the walls. Yeah, but it's just really hard when you start so far back. 5:04, that's the slowest start we've seen so far, and he's not able to reel anybody in quite yet.
Mind you, we've got another 14 sleds to go. I guarantee that will not be the fastest, the slowest start that we see.
Big waves in 10.
Bad speed at the bottom, though. Again, here's a driver who's only been bobsledding for about 3 years, and then on a kind of part-time basis. Kurt, we talked earlier on about experience. It's not experience of this track, it's experience globally of any ice track that allows you to make better informed judgments in your driving.
Yeah, for the first few year athletes, that's, you know, it's really tough to be able to catch on to every curve of every track. But if you can get a good grasp on just driving a bobsled in general, you know, that'll set you up well. And then you can learn the very minute details of each track in order to perform well at each place. And, you know, this isn't too bad here coming, you know, for the French program to, you know, be first year full-time on World Cup. You know, of course, a few mistakes here, 9 into 10. Actually looks pretty smooth. Huge height, though, in 10 on that first wave and the second wave. And if you can eliminate that a little bit, cut some of the pressures, and you cut the distance just a little bit.
Our 20th sled will complete the field. Unfortunately, there's still another 13 teams that are trying to get in, so it is now dog eat dog. 20th on the ice is Poland's Dawid Kupczyk. Pavel Moroz behind him.
The Kupczyk and the Polish team, they've got quite a story about how they got here to Sochi. They decided not to use the FIBT transportation, save a little bit of money, and drive here. They got pulled over a number of times coming here, transporting their sled, and it took them a few days to actually be able to drive here from Poland through Ukraine to get here to Sochi. But they made it about halfway through last week, and they've been able to get a number of quality runs.
We talked about how loud the sled sound, this BTC Latvian sled. And everything vibrates so much on this track.
A little long on curve 7. 9 into 10, takes that wave like I've seen everybody else, minimizes it quite a bit. 0.8 of a second back now. He's come back from 20th position into 19th position, so maybe working his way up a little bit.
$9,900s back, 19th place, so he's in front of Jan Verber of the Czech Republic. Verber is the man on the bubble. So 19th spot at the line for Poland's Dawid Kupczyk. At the moment, he is in the race, but at the moment, everybody is in the race. However, I think anybody from, well, Justin Cripps, John Jackson, tied for 15th, might be safe, but Edwin van Kalker, Loïc Kosteg, David Kupchik, Jan Verber, the final 4 sleds, I would say definitely not yet safe. 20 sleds have completed the course, still 13 to go. Leaders aren't going to be challenged by the remainder, but those at the bottom end of the top 20 may well be. Bert Hefty with a slender margin to carry into Heat 2. Well, from tie for 15th on down, it might be nervous times, and this would certainly be one of the sleds you might expect to fight his way into the top 20. Jürgen Loacker, Marcus Sammer behind him, not going to start below 5 seconds, but he does perhaps have the driving skills and the experience to have made enough of this track to get into the 20.
Yeah, Loacker's got at least 6, 7, 8 years of driving experience that we said, you know, you can transfer from other tracks at least to this track. You know, he might not know the small details of this track yet, but what he's learned on other tracks, he can transfer here.
Well, we're still going back to Whistler after the games, now 5 years, and people are still learning the intricacies of that track, and would be the same in Cesana as well. Will we still able to go there? So we'll be coming back to this place and learning more and more every time. Loacker started 20th, Kurt. He's in 20th at the moment.
Now he's worked his way up at the 19th place, 77 hundredths of a second back from our leader, Bert Hefty.
Little brush, almost touching the wall. Gets clean over the rise in 15. Starts to drop back down through 16 and 17. The final corner, 129.2 is good speed. 19th place. At the moment, he is safe. He is 7 hundredths in front of David Kupchik. Jan Verber of the Czech Republic is out of the race. A little disappointing to finish your season not making the cut, but that's going to be the case for a third of our field.
Out of curve 10, coming into, out of curve 11 through the little chicane part, keeps the sled mostly straight, but it seems like every sled has drifted to the left a little bit and taken that tap. You can actually see some of the ice on the wall there starting to wear away from all those sleds taking that tap on the left side.
I wonder if just the little extra bit of speed is changing where the pressures are in the corners and the drivers are struggling to react. Well, next up, Michel Klingler and Jürgen Bergens of Liechtenstein. Klingler, now a veteran of 2 World Championships, a financial controller from Mauren in Liechtenstein.
I wouldn't expect a start time that's going to be really competitive. A 5:13, by far the slowest we've seen so far. It's going to be really hard for him to get a second run and finish in the top 20.
Well, to put that into perspective, Alana Myers and Asia Evans set a track record in the women's race yesterday of 5:16, and that time may be quicker than a number of the sleds we've still got left to start.
Yeah, I think Alana and Asia are going to catch at least 3 or 4 probably of the men's sleds that we're going to see here coming up soon.
Little bumpy, oh, and 9 into 10 claims its first race victim, and thrown out the back, Jürgen Bergens. And that is a very ugly looking clatter, sensibly holding himself very low in the sled. Michel Klingler, it rights itself, and now he can bring it down to the finish, and this is where that really long outrun is going to pay for itself in spades. He's not got much speed, but of course he does not control the brakes, and he's probably pretty dazed after that as well. Too dazed, in fact, to get back into the back. He doesn't even know he's lost his brake man.
Doesn't realize it. If one of those workers can grab the sled right there, they're going to try to reach out. Yeah.
Good job by the track workers. Well done. Won't be the first, in fact it might be the first time they've had to do that. The hooks are there though in preparation to grab the sled. That's reminiscent of Cortina, isn't it?
Yeah, it's never good when they have to bring out those hooks. Whistler, they had those as well when some of those crashes happen. Yeah. Some of the sleds don't make it all the way up the braking stretch, and you know, it's going to take a little bit of practice. They were a little slow getting there, but you know, it's just great to see that sled didn't go half backwards down that course again.
Yeah. Well, Michel Klingler certainly had his bell rung by this crash.
Really low in 9. In that last pressure, he just couldn't control it, keep it down. Yep, just right over into 10.
He knows it's coming, tries to get in under the cowling so the sled meets the ice first. Up in the woodwork as well, and it might have been that impact that just convinced Jürgen Bergens not to try and cling on any further.
Yeah, that's pretty tough. As a brakeman, you're told to try to stay in the sled, but, you know, sometimes with all those pressures,
wow, that is ugly. Oh, my goodness, he is going to be sore after that. And the ice as well. I mean, we talk about ice burns, but this ice, particularly, Kurt, is really rough. Not talking a little bit choppy, we're talking rough enough that if you run your hand along it, it scrapes your hand off. So Bergens by no means took the easy run out.
Yeah, by ejecting out of the sled, you know, he was going 80 miles per hour. You know, that's you're just going to leave some burns on his shoulders, maybe on his elbows.
It's like getting off a motorcycle. Sometimes there's no option, but the road is not a comfortable place to be. There's Michel Klingler. It's going to be a track hold while they fix the worst of the gouges. And for the crowd here, that'll be the first time they've ever seen a bobsled crash in the flesh, if you like. And a nice warm round of applause for Michel. And he came into the finish. Well, brought it down too early in 9, and that is the cardinal sin, because pressure's not done with him, Kurt.
Yeah, you couldn't do anything with that final pressure. Just threw his right end of the sled up in the air. And because curve 10 is so close to 9, had no time for that sled to fall back on the 4 runners. The brakeman just couldn't hold on to his handles anymore, sliding on his backside. It's never something you want to see.
No. Out of 10, it goes down the chute into 11. The left-hander, it's upside down, hits the woodwork, thrown back down, hits the inside wall. How it rolled the wrong way back out in the exit of 11, I'll never know.
I don't know if that's good luck or bad luck, but he ends up on 4 runners and takes him another curve, I think, to realize that he was on 4 runners before he could get control of the sled.
Yeah, that was not the ride he wants. He's seen it now. I'm sure that the guys in our TV truck will give him a copy of that. Not the sort of, you'll put that away in a drawer and look at it in a decade's time when you've retired from the sport. Not the sort of thing you want to dwell on too often, but again, very glad news indeed that both the driver and brakeman seem to be A-OK.
There's going to be a track hold for a few minutes while the track workers patch those spots of ice that fell off because of the bunks and the driver's helmet and everything other than runners running across the ice. You know, that can deteriorate the ice pretty quickly.
Well, our full-time jury members in their regular blue and grey FIBT jackets. The guys in the white jackets are workers here from Russia, from the track, so they are learning, like the track workers, all about the sport, because, of course, the next time that more than Russian sleds are on this track after the training week, it will be the real deal, the biggest show on earth. And they have to be fully prepared to run this race. And you can see the corrugation all the way through that corner, Kurt, the high points over every peak. Look quite clearly, not just where the sleds have damaged them, but all the runners across it.
Yeah, some of that from the bunks, some of that from the runners, some of that might even be from the brakeman's helmet.
Yeah, you can see those strips. Those stripes down, there's every one of those is a little vibration as you go across them. It's like an 80-mile-an-hour cattle grid. That's why the sleds sound quite so noisy here on this Sankey sliding centre surface. Well, that'll be one that gets him a beer or two, I should think, in the hotel bar later on, and if he didn't have a headache now, he probably will by tomorrow morning. Those guys are going to be very stiff. I mean, the legacy of that is going to be hanging around them for a couple of days.
Yeah, and even though they weren't going to finish in the top 20, because Bergens wasn't able to stay inside the sled, even though when they cross the finish line, they will be disqualified, you know, even though they didn't plan on probably getting a second run to begin with, but you know, they're not going to have any points or result from this race.
Which is a shame. It's only his, third World Cup race of his career, I think. So fairly inexperienced young driver. Again, just once again shows, you know, Kurt, when you're riding the sled and it's all under control, it all feels under control, doesn't it? And it just reminds you, like when a skater falls on their backside, you know, it's a fine line.
Yeah, you know, I had a basketball coach in high school that always said you want to play on the edge of out of control. Yeah. And that's exactly what bobsled is. It's just being on the edge of out of control all the time.
The famous Grand Prix driver Ayrton Senna's publicly stated way of learning a track was to go fast enough to crash in every corner and then back off a bit, which you don't want to do in bobsledding. You don't get so many trips down the track as you get laps in a Formula One session to get it sorted out. But yeah, whatever carries you off the track is just a fraction more than you really needed, so you back it back an iota and there you go, that's the limit. And there are perhaps slightly more scientific ways of going about it, but to each his own. Well, nice grandstand area there, fully undercover. When you're around the start area and the finish area, you kind of forget what the weather's doing outside. Some of the fans coming here for their first ever taste of a bobsleigh race. And up and down the track in quite a few places there are sleds sitting around for exactly that, photo ops. And you would imagine by the time we come back again, they will be gorgeously liveried up in full Sochi 2014 colours. At least we'd certainly hope so.
Yeah, also with this track hole, that's going to be a disadvantage for Kibermanis of the Latvian team, who has to go next. You know, he's just waiting at the top of the track. He was, you know, all fired up, ready to go, and then now this 5, maybe 10-minute track hole is really going to throw a wrench in the works.
Bernd Hefke of Switzerland is our race leader. From Thomas Florschutz and Oskars Melbardis, tied to the 100th of a second behind him. Lyndon Rush, the points leader, is in 4th place, and his only realistic rival, Melbardis, is just 1 spot in front. That is not enough to give Melbardis the crystal globe at the end of the season. Another tie in the top 15. Justin Cripps and John Jackson of Great Britain. And our 20th sled, David Kupchik, at the moment is the man on the bubble. Jan Verber and Michel Klingner will not get a second run. The track is now clear, die Bahn ist frei, and whatever that translates to into Russian for Oskars Kibermanis, he could tell me. The Latvians all speak it like natives. Raivis Zirups is the brakeman. And the question is, although the 5-minute delay might have slowed them down physically, has it allowed the track perhaps to cool a little and hold some of its speed? Will that help him get into the top 20? A 4:91 start is certainly a long way towards helping.
Kibermanis had some great downtimes in practice, mostly in 4-man. If he learned anything during those 4-man trips, was some of those secrets of those curves. And I think, you know, he's doing really well so far. Out a little bit of a drift there coming out of curve 5 into 6, and that's that uphill portion. That's going to cost him a little bit.
Well, like Oskars Melbardis 2 years before him, a brakeman translated into a driver, holds it a little late on corner 9 again, and again off 11.
Yeah, he's falling back pretty quick. A rank of 7 at the start to 11, 17, 18 now.
He's going to struggle to make the top 20. 125 was good speed, needs 129 at the bottom. 128.4, is he going to be close inside the top 20? 19th place, so that bumps David Kupchik. Sandis Prusis looks pretty happy with that. The Latvian coach. He's got 2 very young drivers. Both their predecessors are here. Gatis Guts is working with the FIBT with the jury members. And
yeah, Jānis Minin's definitely a very successful Latvian driver, but you know, really late onto curve 9, and that's where the Liechtenstein sled had trouble as well. But you know, like curve 10 comes up so quickly, 9 into 10. It's a tough combination.
Yes, it is. Late in one, very late in the other. Jānis Minin's also coaching here, coaching the Belgian girls. Next up, Ivo de Bruyn, again an occasional World Cup performer this season. Started in North America, 2 11th place finishes for the first 2 races. He's only done 3 other World Cup races this season. Let's see what he can produce here. He's got Broer van der Zijde on the back of this Netherlands 2 sled, and another Eurotech sled.
Earlier last week, they picked up another set of eyes to help coach him. Helen Upperton now coaching some of the Dutch, at least for these 2 weeks, to try to help Ivo and Edwin van Kalker find the best lines.
Yeah, Helen is now being appointed as the official mercenary of coaching, according to her former teammates and friends, alleged friends in the American camp. So 3rd different nation she's coached in almost as many weeks. I think when you've got that experience hanging around, people are very keen to use it.
Ivo's had a number of good start times this year. 4:97 though on this track is not what he expected, I think, Ebbs. was hoping that he would have pushed about a 492, 493 at least in order to keep him in the mix. And he's falling back. He's now in 19th position.
17th at the start, 19th in the last 2 splits. Can he hold on inside the top 20? The man on the bubble, Jürgen Loacker, he's in 20th place. Loacker's out of the race at the moment. Will he hold it to the line? He does. Loacker is out, and he is in just... Oh, no. Yes, he is. No, they're not tied. They're 200ths of a second apart. Very close. That's tough for Jürgen Loacker. And this is the cut. Not in at the moment then, Ivo de Bruyn. So both Dutch sleds are in. Van Kalker 17th, de Bruyn 20th in the game. Not what either would have hoped for here.
Again, that little problem section coming out of 11, there's a little bit of a kink, and we call it the chicanes. There's 2 little curves where the track actually bends, but the sled doesn't rise onto any curve. And then coming into curve 14 gets really high. You can see how high he is compared to the marks left on the ice from the other sleds.
So there's Ivo and Bror van der Zijde, a very tall figure in the background. Next up is Australia's Heath Spence with Lucas Matter on the back handles of the Aussie sled. See what these guys can produce. They're racing only 2-man here. There's just 3 of them left.
Yeah, we talked about some of the teams that Asian Alana might be able to catch. 5:11. All right, they stayed ahead of Asian Alana. That's a good sign for them so far.
A good start from them, 49.2. Good first corner momentum, 30.6 miles an hour. Now up to 46 miles an hour already. Don't forget, this is from pushing a 170-kilo sled from a standstill over just 50 yards. Acceleration rate is quite phenomenal on some of these tracks.
Lines aren't too bad, really high in curve 7.
Now comes the acid test. Doesn't bring it down too early. Gets a good exit, 9 to 10. 124.6. That's not bad speed as well. Still in 24th place, though. Big skid there, I'm afraid. That is going to rule him out. And he was in all sorts of trouble in 14.
That's going to be really tough for him to crawl back into the top 20 now. He's in 23rd position.
127.3. Still not bad speed, despite those big skids. Picks up a place ahead of Jan Verber. And there is the Aussie bobsleigh pilot Astrid Radjenovic watching, but he spends 23rd, not making it into the second heat. A warm welcome from all the crowd here.
Here early on, I think this is curve 4. He really gets that height, and this curve 4 isn't a very big curve, but because he had that height, it was really hard for him to control the sled coming from curve 4, and then caused him to get really high in the beginning part of 5. I think this is from curve 14 into 15, not able to control the sled very well in that uphill portion of the track, and that makes it really difficult to keep speed.
We'll see you next year.
Well, the Clippers have been out. There's been a lot of time to spare in the village here, hasn't there?
I think he missed a
during
spot.
Training. Yeah, I think he may have been. That's what happens when you do it yourself. You just miss a bit. Next up then, Monaco's Patrice Sabel and Boris Vain on the back handle, one of the brand new brakemen he brought in the last couple of weeks. Let's see if they can get down below the 5-second mark. No, 5:18. It's going to be very hard indeed for Patrice to make the field now, I think.
Yeah, Boris had a little trouble loading into the sled. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but once he got in, he kind of went in one shoulder at a time very deliberately, like he was trying to grab something and move something in the bottom of the sled. I'm not sure what happened there.
Might have been perhaps that the galoshes they used to protect the spikes had dropped out into the bottom of the sled, and he wanted to make sure that they weren't going to fall out, because that's instant disqualification again. Hangs on late in 9. 125.5. Good speed, though, from this Monaco sled. This is originally a Christian Rice-built sled that's been modified since by Bruno Mijon. Now, 23rd. He's picking up places, but he needs 3 more spots, and he's only got 1 more corner. Can he make it? He cannot. 57.98. There is Bruno Mijon, and the Monegasques end their season with a first run in this heat. They will not get a second. 129.6 at the bottom, though. That's good speed.
Yeah, but a 5:18 start time, that's going to kill you right away. You know, we mentioned he used to push with the Celis Brown and have great velocity, but, you know, driving curve 9, hangs on that exit pretty late, flops down and into 10. Not in danger of crashing, but that's just not a fast line.
Well, really missing Sebastian Gattuso, the powerhouse on the back of that sled. Bert Hefty, the race leader, from the tie for second. Florschutz Melbardis in with a real shot at victory here. And the rest of the medals, it's going to be a little close to call.
Your top three are
27th of our 33 sleds is Russia's Nikita Zakharov, with Kirill Antuk behind him. Zakharov again, an occasional performer in the World Cup. 4.99 getaway. The Russians throwing everything, including the kitchen sink at this race.
Yeah, we mentioned so far Zhukov is in 5th place and Kazanov is in a tie for 11th place. We expected them to finish better. I'm not sure what Zakharov's expectations were coming to this race, but I would definitely expect he would hope to be in the top 15 because of the number of runs he's had on this track and number of coaching secrets that he might know.
Well, we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens.
Very high in curve 7.
23rd spot off an 18 start and 116.8. Again, I think we're getting speeds from two different timing eyes. He nearly wrecked, just held on.
Curve 11, incredibly high, hit both bunks on the top lip. That sent him out, luckily, fairly straight into the chicanes, but man, that was a dangerous line he took.
I definitely think we're getting speeds from two different timing eyes somewhere. The speeds vary so much, it's ridiculous. 58.57, 26th position. That'll be another uncomfortable conversation with Pierre Lude as well. He's one of 3 different Russians that have been in the Russia 3 sled this year. Talk about poison chalice, that's it. You get 1 or 2 chances a year to perform. He, Alexei Stulnev,
right here in curve 11, you can see how high he is and hits hard. Hit that lip front and then back, and then maybe even front again. Causes some of that ice to fall down, and that back end just falling off that curve.
That is the Jan Verber angle of attack, isn't it, that we saw in Whistler?
But luckily, comes into the chicanes on 4 runners.
Yeah, wow. Lost so much speed, the back just dropped like a stone. Next up, Great Britain's Lamin Dean with Craig Pickering behind him, the second of the GB sleds. The Grenadier Guardsman and the 100-meter specialist. Oh, and a little bit of a late load. Craig Pickering landing like a sack of spuds in the back of the sled, kicks it sideways.
I'm not sure which sled he's driving here. It's got a BMW sponsor on the front, so it looks like the colors of the Swiss.
It does look like the colors of the Swiss. It's got a Swiss cross on the front as well, so I'm assuming that they have borrowed a Swiss sled. Now, there's a number of drivers that were here last year in the International Training Week that are not in World Cup. So it may well be that the Swiss, well, Gregor Baumann is here, isn't he? So was he in the training week last week? Maybe this is his sled. Yeah,
he's been around this week, studying lines, so maybe he did make a short-term loan to Lamin Dean.
Yeah, oh, very high, bounces out of 13, just into 14, just keeps it on the ice. It's a wild ride. This is not necessarily one about the time. It's about whether or not they get down with everything in one piece, and they do. Again, Lamin, occasional real glimpses of speed, but just needs more time on the ice to get it all tidied up. I'm pretty sure that's a Gregor Baumann sled.
Yeah, for the most part, for being the first time in this sled, I guess that's really difficult to jump into a sled and drive it well. But, from curve 11 into 14.
Look at that. Oh, Pickering would have felt that. They were up on the wall with the left side runners nowhere near the track.
Yeah, you saw the left side bounce down and leave a pretty hefty gash in the ice.
Well, they can laugh now, but I bet they weren't laughing then. Milan Janacek and Vladimir Simic now for Slovakia, 29th of our sleds. Just a reminder that Oskars Kiebers-Manis in 19th and Ivo de Bruyne of the Netherlands in 20th are the men on the bubble, should anybody outperform them now.
Janacek, another one that's not going to have a stellar start time here, and that's going to hurt a little bit, drifting off to the left. A 5:14 start. He had a little trouble this week. I think he crashed twice in practice in 2-man.
He's getting used to it now, though, so that's okay. 73.6 kilometers an hour, still 45.8 miles an hour. When we talk about slow, we don't mean slow. We mean not quite as ridiculously fast as the best.
Decent lines up through curve 6, pretty high in 7.
Hit the woodwork, I think, in 7. Didn't phase him. Out of 9 through 10 safely. Takes the first pressure very high. 123.5 isn't bad speed.
But just, you can't find velocity. He didn't have that velocity at the start, and he's not going to find it on the way down the track. So, you know, 27th, 28th position is probably where he's going to finish.
127.5, again, not bad speed at the bottom. Tucks his head under the cowling. 58.43 seconds, and that leaves him in front of Nikita Zakharov, the Russian, who must have had dozens more trips down the track than Janaszak, and Janaszak's giving away, what, 20 years to him as well in terms of youth, if not of experience. Yeah, that's a glass half full reading of any race for you right there.
Yeah, here's curve 7. You can see how high he got. Just misses the lip.
Didn't he? Just missed it.
But even when you're that high, you don't have much control of the sled.
What a good exit from his Latvian-built BTC sled. That's his final run of the season. Next up, first of our 2 Korean sleds, Yoon Jung-won and Yoonglin Jun. Of course, Korea not holding the games this year, but in 5 years' time. Not next year, but in 5 years' time. So they are already in their Olympic cycle leading up to Pyeongchang, and that's why both crews are now here. I imagine both will drive 4-man as well tomorrow.
Yeah, the host country of the Olympics gets an automatic spot in the race. So, you know, no matter how Korea finishes throughout the World Cup season, they're going to have at least 1 sled in 2-man and 4-man, but, you know, they want to be competitive. So they're really, you know, put in 2 sleds, let them battle it out, kind of learn from each other, create sort of a rivalry. They try to make the entire program better.
Well, it's exactly the same as happens in the Russian program, the US program, as you mix and match the best athletes to try and get each sled working as well as you possibly can. And that's the team element of it.
Big skids, though, in a lot of these places in between these curves.
Again, these guys with only a few years driving experience. The program was a sort of start-up operation 5 or 6 years ago. And these are the second generation of Korean bobsled drivers.
128.9 kilometers an hour leaves him in 22nd place. He's not going to see another run.
That was getting close, though. He was getting close. 26 at the start, drove himself into 22nd. He's 0.06 of a second away from making the cut.
Yeah, that's a good way to finish the season. I don't know if he's going to go and take some practice runs on any of the other tracks in the world, but you know, if that's his last run of the year, he's got to feel pretty pleased. He can rest on that throughout the summer and look to improve.
One tiny little skid less, that would have seen him in the 20, bumping Ivo de Bruyne. That was very close. Now, what about Dong-Yeon Kim? Now, he is the more experienced of the 2 Koreans. Still just 25 years old, from Seoul, the Korean capital. Made his debut in the 2-man in Whistler, December 2012.
And that's quite a place to make a debut.
It was January 2012, wasn't it? The North American swing. 5:09 getaway, 100 slower than their teammates. Same first corner velocity, exactly 49.0.
Yeah, like I mentioned, this is quite the rivalry between these 2. They really learn from each other, and because their start times and down times are so comparable, you know, they always want to finish on top of the other.
2 brand new sleds here. And they've gone with a Eurotech as well.
He's drifted back into 30th position right now, which is last compared to, well, with the exception of the Liechtenstein crew that crashed.
121.7, 3 kilometers an hour down on his teammate.
Really high in 11 again. Hit that top lip.
Got 14 to 15 stitched up, but that's about the only straightaway where he's been straight. 123.9, 5 kilometers an hour down. Again, I have to say, there are just occasions where I question quite what we're getting from the track's timing system. Swiss Timing are being fed the data from the sensors in the track, which they didn't install and don't control. And sometimes you think, I wonder if we're hearing from the same receptors every time. And the Koreans make it down in 30th spot.
Yeah, here's curve 11 where he gets that extreme height. I think the runners actually hit up on top of that, and that's where you see that spark right there. It's the metal on concrete.
Yep, that's where the ice runs out. So nudge the woodwork away enough to allow the runners to spark off the ice, off the concrete.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of work that needs to be done on those runners to take those scratches out.
Well, luckily they got till December or to November to get it sorted out. Our penultimate sled is Serbia's Vuk Radjenovic. Nikola Milinkovic is behind him on the Serbian sled. Wife Astrid right behind, watching proceedings.
Now, Vuk did have a pretty good finish in Eagles, and so it wouldn't be unheard of for him to jump into the top 20 right now, but for the most part, I think it's going to be pretty difficult. The 5:11 start time, 26 hundredths of a second back from Hefty.
Well, he's got the opportunity perhaps to drive himself into contention. Good first corner speed, and he keeps that alive as well. Down to 29th spot, though. And using the same sled that Astrid drove yesterday, the same green Aussie sled.
Curve 11, right? Or excuse me, curve 9 where a few sleds had trouble.
Gets it into 10, but only 1:24.2. That's not going to be enough, is it, to get him into the race?
Well, some of the sleds that are in the top 20 have little trouble coming out of 11. Vuk didn't have that trouble, so maybe he could jump a number of spots here to move up, but I don't think he's going to catch 7 spots in 2 curves.
No, 27th at the moment. 1:27.5 is good speed, but it's too little too late, I'm afraid. 26th spot. There's his wife and his dad. And a little bit of a depressed look on his dad's face. Vuk takes this very seriously, but again, he's one of those guys that pretty much always has a smile on his face.
Yeah, curve 9 on that exit, just a little long. Definitely not as long as some of the sleds we've seen, but that's just not going to cut it to break into the top 20.
He's a big guy when he gets moving. Last sled on the ice then, Nicolae Strate of Romania with Florin Kratsuin behind him. Well, Dorin Grigore has been driving for Romania up until now, and with Strate coming back in. He injured his wrist in a motorcycle accident early in the season, and we expected him to appear in Eagles. Didn't. He was there, but wasn't racing. Didn't race in the World Champs either.
Yeah, Strata really had a great World Championships last year in Koenigsegg, but really hasn't been able to put it together this year. A start time of a 5:03, just really not going to cut it. 37 hundredths of a second back, move from 24th to 20th, so maybe that's good start velocity. Now, if you can hold that 20th place, and kick Ivo de Bruin out of the top 20, maybe that allow him a second run. Still in 20th place now.
Yeah, on previous experience, he should have enough pace and experience to get in. 1:23.5 could really do with a little bit more. Still in 20th place. It's him or De Bruin. A cliffhanger in the very last sled. Is the Romanian going to make it in on his World Cup debut? He's up into 18th. He's in the race. De Bruin is out. A good drive from Nicolae Strate, the last man in the field. He is in, and Ivo de Bruin is out of the race. And you can see how much the coaches like that. It's taken a long time for that wrist to heal enough. It is healed enough. He's in. That's all he cares about on this run.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible, because we mentioned again, some of those smaller nations partner up with the bigger nations in order to, to get a little bit better equipment and coaching, but Nicolae Estrada did not. He elects to go on his own with his own coaching, and really does a lot with not much.
So, drama from first to last. Bert Hefty is our race leader. Great start from the Swiss pairing of Hefty and Thomas Lamparter. And they have driven themselves from a big start into, well, not a big lead, but a lead of any size is something here. 16 hundredths of a second ahead of the tie for second, Thomas Florschutz and Oskars Melbardis. Lyndon Rush lies fourth ahead of Alexander Zubkov, and Corey Butner in sixth position. So, Hefty, 2 wins already in two-man this season in just 5 races. Can he make it 3 from 6 and hit a .5 average? Florschutz and Melbardis will be hoping not. Lyndon Rush not out of the medals, nor is Zubkov. Corey Butler, can he find another spot in the second heat? Looking further down the order, the final sleds will be rounded out by Loic Kosterg of France, Nicolae Astrati of Romania, and Oskars Kibasmanis of Latvia. And from Ivo de Brun, 21st place on down, including the crashed sled of Michel Klingner of Liechtenstein. They will be watching the second heat from trackside. And you can do that from the comfort of your own lounge chair. Join Kurt Tomasevich, John Morgan and me, Martin Haven, for the final encounter of the regular season. The last run of the two-man bobsleigh coming up from Sochi in Russia.